Call Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the government members speaking on this bill have made much of the importance of bipartisan consensus and support for electoral reform legislation. And the point that I would simply make to them is that that goes both ways. It requires a willingness to engage in discussion and to compromise on both sides. And that was not there when the Electoral Finance Act came through the House before the last election, because the National Party thought the politics of playing politics with the issue was too good. They were given plenty of opportunities in the lead up to the Electoral Finance Act being passed to engage in discussion with the then government and chose not to. They chose not to because they would rather play politics. And you know how? You know how we know they chose to play politics with it? Because one of the bills that we're about to pass through second reading now, the Parliamentary Service Amendment Bill, which we're currently debating as part of this package of bills, contains exactly the same provisions that the National Party railed against when it was put forward by the last Labour government. So what did they call it? What did they call that? Jerry Brownlee called it Mugabe-style legislation. Mugabe-style legislation, which they are now passing another piece of legislation to continue. So it was Mugabe-style legislation when a Labour government passed it. Now it's all sweetness and light and bipartisan consensus, now that it's a national government passing exactly the same provisions back into law again. Jerry Brownlee called it utterly disgraceful legislation as well. Nick Smith said it was a rort. He said never in his 17 years had he seen a bill that would bring this Parliament into so much disrepute. That was what he said about the bill that we are currently debating, that is going to go through the House this afternoon. That's what the National Party said when they were in opposition. So they're getting on their high horse now and saying, oh well, you've got to have consensus, you've got to have bipartisan support for electoral reform legislation. It goes both ways. They have to be willing to compromise and to engage in the discussion, and they weren't before the last election. They're not this time around either in some respects. We have a bill on the order paper under the name of Paul Quinn that makes significant change to the electoral law in this country that does not have bipartisan consensus and support, and the government are using their majority to push that through anyway. So it appears that their willingness to engage in electoral reform only where there's bipartisan consensus has limits. It has limits. And Paul Quinn's bill appears to be exempt from that. So I would just say that the National Party's rhetoric on that appears to be just a little bit hollow. Mr Speaker, to go back, to rewind the clock back to where this all started, back in 2004, 2005, where we saw the exclusive brethren spending a huge amount of money to run a third-party parallel campaign, unregulated, uncontrolled, unmonitored, in support of the National Party. And the exclusive brethren ran that campaign, and senior National Party figures, including some who are currently in this administration, were not entirely truthful in what they knew about the exclusive brethren's campaign. They knew about it, and when asked about it, said they didn't. That wasn't truthful, and they should be held to account for not telling the public the full truth about what they knew about the exclusive brethren campaign. One of the reasons I think the provisions in this bill around parallel third-party campaigns are important is I would hate to see New Zealand going down the track of the United States, where there are significant third-party campaigns, and in fact, in some cases, the third-party campaigns are bigger than the candidate and the party campaigns themselves. We're talking multi-million-dollar campaigns. And in a lot of cases, those campaigns are simply dirty. They are smear campaigns. I spent some time in 2004 in the United States just before George Bush's re-election, and I was absolutely disgusted with the third-party campaign that was run against the then Democratic presidential candidate, John Kerry. They were the Swift Vote Veterans for Truth ran this campaign that was not based on truth. There was no truth in a lot of the allegations they made whatsoever. The only thing it had behind it was an awful lot of money, a huge amount of money. And they smeared John Kerry's character with a massive advertising campaign that the Democratic Party were unable to counter. I would be very disappointed if we opened the door for that type of campaigning in New Zealand. I think we need to be very clear that if someone is going to do any form of significant political campaigning in this country, it should be open. People should be able to know who's behind it. If we're seeing ads in the paper, expensive ads in the paper or on the TV or anything else like that, the New Zealand public are entitled to know who is paying for that and what is their agenda. This legislation at least allows that to happen, because it says if you're going to spend more than $300,000 on a third-party campaign, there are going to be rules around it. You can't spend more than $300,000 on those third-party campaigns. My apologies. It says and it also has other requirements around the disclosure of political donations. I think those things are really important. The donations thresholds are higher than I would like to see. At the moment, it's $1,000 for a candidate, donations to a candidate, and $10,000 for a political party. In my view, that's high enough. But, as I said at the beginning, compromise and bipartisan consensus on electoral reform requires compromise on both sides. And the Labour Party has chosen to compromise on those donations thresholds in order to ensure that we could get an arrangement governing the third-party campaigns, preventing someone from spending an independent party spending huge amounts of money. I think that's a really important. I think that's a really important compromise that was able to be reached, and therefore I'm very, very supportive of it. I want to congratulate the Labour members in particular on the committee for the work that they have put into this. I know that that's been approached with a lot of diligence. And including by some of the national members on the committee too, I'm sure, and I think that's I try not to, and I know that it's been approached with a lot of diligence on both sides, and I want to say that I'm really pleased about that. Another provision in this bill that I'm very supportive of is the provision requiring political parties to disclose the donations they receive in bands. Regarding to the size of the donations. I think that will allow the public to monitor, and the watchdogs to monitor whether or not this system is being pushed to its limit, rorted in a way that wasn't intended. If the public see a whole heap of donations coming through that are just below the disclosure thresholds, then there may be some questions that the public might want to ask about that. I think that's another really important change that has been reached with this legislation that will increase the overall transparency of the political donation system, and that's something that's really important. As I said, the public of New Zealand are entitled to know when they go to vote and when they receive information trying to encourage them in the way that they cast that vote. They're entitled to know who's behind that and who's funding it. We don't want to see big money, thank you Mr Speaker, we don't want to see big money in New Zealand politics buying influence, buying access to power. Let's be really honest about this. Not many people donate to political parties without wanting to get, donate significant amounts to political parties without wanting to get something back out of it. Now it could simply be access to people in authority that they wish to get. It could be that they have a particular agenda and they therefore donate monies to the parties that have policies that are consistent with that agenda. That's okay, providing it's transparent, because then the public can make their own judgments about whether or not they think somebody is trying to buy influence by giving donations to a political party. So the transparency requirements around this are really important. That's one of the reasons why the Labour Party is willing to set aside our disagreements over one or two of the issues, including the donations disclosure thresholds, so that we can get the bipartisan support required to pass this bill through the House. So overall, Mr Speaker, the Labour Party will be voting in favour of both of these bills, the Mugabe-style legislation that the National Government are now trying to pass in regard to the Parliamentary Service Amendment Bill, which is what Jerry Brownlee called it, Mugabe-style legislation, and also the Electoral Finance Reform and Advance Voting Amendment Bill. We'll be supporting both of these bills further. Thank you, Mr Speaker.